Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar. And today, as we did last week, we have another guest with us, which is John Schell, based out of LA in the USA. So, John, hopefully you're there in the background.
I am here, yes.
You are here, great, that's good, through the magic of the internet. So if you don't know this voice, I'm the guy at the top, David, part of the software sales team based out of Copenhagen in Denmark. And then as we just heard in the background, John from LA, California. And you're the guy on the right, I assume, in the picture.
Yes, I am one on the right. And it's easy to get confused sometimes, but yes.
So we'll be back with John in a minute. I'll just go through some housekeeping stuff, John. So we've got 60 minutes today. Well, that's the maximum time allowed. We don't have to use all of that up, but we can if we want. And you're very welcome and indeed encouraged to ask questions throughout. If you're on your Mac or PC, at the bottom of the GoToWebinar control panel, the last section is called questions. So just put a question in there via text, and that will come through to me, and then I can feed questions through to John. So don't be shy. It can be anything on Capture One, choice of equipment, business things, all that sort of stuff. Any questions that you have, you can fire across at John. I am recording the session as well, so you're more than welcome to review that again on our YouTube channel. And roughly in about 1 hour's time, you'll get a follow-up email, or 2 hours' time, which has a link to the recording and different ways to follow John as well. So I think that dispenses with that. Before I put the screen over to you, John, just in case no one knows who you are, I think that's very unlikely, otherwise they probably wouldn't have joined the webinar. So your website is up on screen, which people should be able to see. So you're predominantly a lifestyle photographer, correct?
That's correct. Lifestyle, yeah.
And what sort of clients are you shooting for mostly?
I shoot for a lot of apparel companies, outdoor sports, yoga, swim companies. I have a couple of clients that are shoe companies. Some make eyeglasses, that sort of stuff. But I try to do spread it out evenly as much as I can.
So really, you're in the right place in the world for that kind of.
Yeah.
Because you're not a native to Los Angeles, that's correct, isn't it?
That's correct. Yeah, I'm not actually. I grew up in New York, moved out to Southern California about 12 years ago, and then I moved to LA from San Diego about 2 years ago.
Okay, very nice. Very nice. Just want to check with the crowd that everyone can see John's website. There was someone who couldn't. If the webinar gets stuck on any particular page or anything like that, just if you exit and enter in again, that tends to fix it. Should it be stuck on any particular page or anything like that. But for the most part, I think everybody can see us. Okay, so what we thought we'd do today, John, in our brief discussions, is that we'd have a look at some of your images within Capture One and a couple of the steps you might go through from start to finish. And as we said at the start, when we were chatting, that you hope no one was disappointed, because it's not like you're doing 100 different things in Capture One, but I think that's okay, because obviously Capture One is not about necessarily having to fix a bunch of stuff. It's for your creative flair. So what I'll do is I'm going to make you the presenter. 1 second. If GoToWebinar wants to play ball. 1 second. Has this annoying bug sometimes that clicking on the panel. There we go. Doesn't bring this up. Okay, make organizer. Here we go. Nope, not organizer. Let's try that one more time. Make presenter. Okay, you should be able to see John in just a minute. So there should be an alert on your screen now, John, and then we'll be able to see yours.
Yes.
Okay.
There we go.
Stuff.
Okay, you should be able to see my screen. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Correct.
Excellent. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us here. I am so excited to be here, and I'm so grateful that Phase One asked me to come and do this. I had a question whether or not they wanted me because, as David had said, there are some people who do a lot of work to their images. They do a lot of pre-production, production, a lot of work on them in the software, whether it's Capture One or if it's Photoshop, that sort of thing. My whole thing is everything is pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy. There's really not a lot of work. So I don't know if you came here expecting to see some Photoshop secrets or some Capture One secret panels or anything that I use, and I think you might be hopefully pleasantly disappointed.
Exactly.
A lot of what I do is very straightforward. It's very simple. Probably one of the things I've learned over the last few years of doing this, and especially over the last couple of years of doing this professionally, is that the simpler something is, at least in my case, the better the response is to it. Whenever I try to do something that's over the top production-wise, it usually kind of falls flat. Whereas when I go towards a little bit more organic, I tend to have a better response. So I try to keep my edits in line with that, and I try to keep a lot of what I do kind of true to what I see and what I experience and what, on a photo shoot, or whether it's with a model or a group or product or the ocean as you see in front of me here. I try not to overdo it too much. Of course, sometimes I do overdo it too much, but that's just part of life, I guess. So what I thought I would do is, I have some images here. If you look, first of all, let me bring up my screen over here. You guys can see it. One of the things I love about, and I'm trying not to make this a huge hour-long advertisement for Capture One, but just a little bit of history with my use of Capture One. I've been interested in it probably since version 7, I believe, and I was a die-hard user of Adobe Bridge for a long time, just because it's the way my mind worked, the way I could visualize stuff. It was very straightforward. It was there for me. And then I switched over, I attempted to switch to Capture One, and I went kind of back and forth between that and Bridge for a while, and then I went to Lightroom, and I stuck with that for a few years. And then within the last couple of years, I really decided to make a push to learn how to use Capture One, and not only learn how to use it, but to become proficient enough where I could start feeling comfortable enough to tell other people to use it. And I think I'm finally at that point. There are some power users who I've seen who are just absolutely over the top amazing in what they do and what they can do in Capture One. I'm definitely not one of those people. I keep it very, very simple. In fact, if you look at my screen over here, one of the things I did to help me and one of the things I love about it was that I was able to kind of switch things over from the standard, editing panels on the left and images on the right or on the bottom. I kind of switch it over so it's a little bit, it's the way I can visualize things. This is how I visualize it. It looks a little bit more familiar to me, so it's therefore easier for me to use. As far as the panels or the tabs up across the top, kept it very simple. There's really not a lot of stuff there. Just the basic edits that I do, sharpening, some grain, clarity if I need it, levels, white balance, all my basic edits, color balance, curve, etc., and then finally cropping. If there's anything more in depth that I need, I've been using Photoshop for probably 15 years or something like that. I'm very comfortable in it, so rather than trying to reinvent the wheel over here, if there's something that needs further attention, skin blemishing or that kind of stuff, I just go right to Photoshop. I hope that doesn't upset anybody, especially anybody at Facebook. But
No, I don't think so. And I think just important to note what you're saying, that the interface that we see here for Capture One, that's actually kind of quite different to the default because if anyone watching this hasn't seen Capture One before, traditionally we have that tool panel you see on the right-hand side is over on the left, and the thumbnails are over on the right, but pretty much any element in Capture One you can put wherever you like, and that includes, removing tools, changing the order of those tools on the right-hand side, changing the order of those tabs at the top. So really the point is that if you're kind of continuously scrolling past a tool that you never use, then just get rid of it and you can see the helpful list of all the tools there. So it's about making a workspace that works for you and not that some guy in Denmark thought was a good idea, because we all have we have this kind of argument every year that we all submit the best workspace and then you end up with 10 different workspaces, and we have to kind of get down to some common ground. But nearly every single person, if you haven't used Capture One, spends a small amount of time customizing it to their needs.
Absolutely. That was one of the first things I did. And David, just a question, because I didn't know this. I went back and forth between, for this for a while. Is this relatively new, being able to have such customize it so much where I can move all of these panels to the right side?
No, that's pretty much been around since before my time, that's for sure. So definitely as far back as version 6, which I remember. So I'm pretty sure it probably started to some basic extent in 3 and 4, and then probably in 5 was when it really went full speed.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I had no idea. I just assumed I think I switched it over Capture One 9. And then I just was kind of like, oh, this is wonderful, I can switch this. But apparently I had just missed it the entire time. So there we go. So that's pretty much my experience with Capture One and my editing. I keep it very straightforward, very simple. Now, of course, with anything else, if you scroll through on my website and you see a photo that looks like it's overly photoshopped, it probably has been. Some of my work needs to be updated. So I know there's a tendency to, if somebody says, oh, I don't really use Photoshop that much, immediately there's some folks who like to go and say, well, this photo has a lot of Photoshop on it. So yes, I'm sure there are times, and I'm sure in the future I will also use Photoshop quite a bit. But for what I like to do here, and what I like to do most times, is keep things simple, because it's less confusing for myself.
Yes.
So that's my history with Capture One, Lightroom, and me coming over to it. As far as business history, just a quick, if you guys are here, then I'm assuming you know me for a little while. I've been shooting for probably the last 8 years. Prior to that, I was a high school teacher, worked with students with special needs in New York and out in San Diego in Southern California. About 8 years ago, I picked up a camera after a 20-year gap of not shooting, and decided, I'm going to take some pictures. And long story short, it kind of snowballed. There was a great response to my work, and since that time, I've been doing this. For the last 2 years, 2.5 years, I've been doing this full-time professionally here in Los Angeles. So I've been very, very lucky, and I'm very very grateful for how things have progressed over the last couple of years. It's been an amazing trip, and Phase One has been wonderful because they've been with me almost the entire time that I've been full-time commercial photographer. I think I quit my job in August of 2014, and then I did the first standout event in Los Angeles and San Francisco about a month or so later. So these guys have been with me for a while, so I'm grateful for their support as well. Okay,
that's great.
So,
I didn't realize you were so new to the game, actually, John. So that's pretty
relatively new. I mean, I'm relatively old in real life, but to photography, I'm pretty new. My early 20s were spent completely obsessed with video production, all that kind of stuff. I think I took a film class in high school, which was with the little Pentax single lens reflex, developing our own film kind of stuff. But that was it. When I picked up a camera again about 8 years ago, I fell in love with it and became completely obsessed. And it's basically every
Great.
decision I've made since have been, how do I spend more time doing this? It's not just,
Story.
yeah, I mean, it's a tale of obsession, and it's pretty much what it's come to. Um, okay, so I just wanted to pause. Are there any questions that we have, or anybody want clarification or anything like that?
There's a couple, but
Okay.
let's see a couple of images in Capture One, and then because there's a couple more coming in, and then we have a little question break then. Yeah.
Okay, perfect, perfect.
Hmm.
Okay, so I'll just scroll through these. I'll give a brief description of what I did. All of the images that you guys see on the left-hand side here are straight out of camera, and they're from various shoots that I've done over the last few months. Most of them were shot, looking through them, yeah, the majority of them were shot with my Fuji X Pro 2. Some of them were shot with my Canon 1DX. I'll go through real quick. These ocean shots, these first three right here, I shot with my 1DX and my Aquatech water housing probably back in December. Um, Before this was last year in Miami. This is straight out of camera. Down here, this is with my Fuji. This was probably this past December. Same thing here. Also, Fuji. And you guys can see, if you're looking over here, the ICC profile is the Fuji X Pro 2. This is generic. So there's been nothing done to these photos. They're all straight out of camera. And of course, they're all raw files too. Same. This is also with the Fuji. This was actually shot, if you take a look, I shot this in JPEG just because I forgot to switch it back to RAW for some reason. And so these are interesting to me because they kind of pick up the camera profile that I had applied in camera. And these guys down the bottom here are also with the Fuji. These are all straight out of camera. Okay, so basically, if I wanted to take a few of these and do just a couple of quick edits, looking at this one specifically, I wouldn't really go in too much. Obviously, there's a little too much color in here. It's a little pink, and I think it's because a couple of things. I probably was shooting around sunset. Yeah, this was probably, if I recall, a few minutes right before sunset. So there's a lot of pink in the sky. There's a lot of pink in the atmosphere, and it just seemed to pick it up. So looking at this, very basic edits to this. My first thing I would go through is probably try the auto white balance, and then look maybe auto exposure. It's probably a little too much, so I'd reel that back a little bit. One of the good things I like about using the Fuji is that it has the ICC, the profiles. So I could go through these and kind of pick the same profiles that I could apply in camera. And from what I understand, these are not available in Capture One 10 yet. I know I had okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a friend who is a Fuji, one of the ex-photographers, and he emailed them to me. I'm not sure where he got them. I know they're probably created by somebody who is a lot more has a lot more understanding of how to do that than I do. I don't, but I'm grateful that I have them, and I'm sure that if you search around on the internet, you can probably find them as well.
We have Elvin says they are from Dark Dungeons. I don't know if he's being sarcastic or if that's someone's name. But,
he is the, I believe it's him. He is my Fuji ex-photographer friend.
Okay.
Fuji ex-photographer. Yeah, not ex-friend, Fuji ex-photographer. Yeah. So yeah, he's the one who forwarded them to me, and then they are available. So hopefully they're not that difficult to locate online. But thank you for that.
I shall do some Google searching in the background, but also on the Fuji X forum, if you search for that, quite a few people have made various ICC profiles, which you could make yourself in Capture One. The color editor allows you to make ICC profiles. But yeah, there's quite a few Fuji shooters out there who have knocked up ICC profiles and just offered them up for free because we have quite a nice Fuji community around us. So yeah, yeah. Anyway, that's enough of me. I'll let you
That's
carry
great.
on.
Thank you. Yeah. So then continuing on with this edit, so there's really not a lot that I would do. I'd probably scroll through to see if there were any of the profiles that I really liked. I mean, I kind of like all of them. It's just a matter of personal taste and the mood. Some of them are a little oversaturated. Some of them are a little undersaturated. I'd probably stick with something like this. I just kind of love the way that her skin kind of pops and glows with that. Maybe bring out a little bit of the shadow, touch of contrast, and like I said, this is me. Everybody else's mileage will vary, of course. Oops, that's a little close. So then after that point, I would, everything else kind of looks fine. I don't feel the need to change any of the colors or any of that kind of stuff. Cropping, I wouldn't do. This is a straight out of camera. Well, it was straight out of camera, but it's not cropped in at all. So I posted this image somewhere else, and somebody had said or suggested that it was cropped in, which isn't the case. So I'd probably bump up the sharpening just a touch. And for that, I mean, that's kind of it. I posted this image on my Instagram a few weeks ago. And I'm pretty sure it looks similar. If not, then it's close. So going from this one, what I would do is then, considering the fact that it's the same time of day, it's the same couple, same skin tone, same kind of situation, I would copy these settings, Shift Command C, and just apply them over to the next. And this, you can see it's a little, I feel like it needs a little bit more contrast, and maybe it's a little too bright, so I'd bump that up a little bit, bring it down just a touch, get a little bit of mood, and then we add this right here. Yeah, and that's something I'd be happy with. I don't think I'd want to bring this into Photoshop at all. I don't see that there's any blemishes or anything that I really need to take care of. Cropping it, maybe bringing it in just a little bit, but there's really nothing that stands out to me as something that I need to do. Same with this image. And then this one's a little different. I posted this one a few days ago, about a week or so ago. So right off the bat, obviously I want to take him out of there. Because I think I had wound up just like they were both walking away from me, and I called their names, and she turned and kind of gave me a look. So wound up cropping this one a little bit. Bring that up. These are always the most difficult ones, just because there's a lot of color in there, and you want to keep the color, but at the same time not oversaturated or not kind of, I don't know what the proper term for that would be, but a lot of this stuff is playing by feel, which to steal
Which is
something
definitely
from musicians.
no bad thing, of course.
Exactly, right. And I mean, I grew up with a couple of musicians in my family, my mom and my grandfather, and my mom was a very, very much a play-by-note type of person, had the notation out in front of her and all that kind of stuff. My grandfather, on the other hand, was a jazz pianist, and so he played. I'm sure he was well trained and taught and knew everything, but a lot of what he played was by feel. When it sounds good, it sounds good, and I agree with that philosophy for a lot of things. Photography, of course, but life, I guess, in general. You kind of just play by feel and see how things turn out. I don't know. So something like this, I play around with some of the colors. I took this photo in Malibu after a long day. The sun was about 10 minutes from setting. That's why there's such a huge sun flare. This was also with my my Fuji X Pro 2, which, by the way, has some of the lenses, the f1.4 lenses, have such a great natural ability to catch a flare. I really find myself enjoying them a lot. It's not a sponsored post, by the way. So,
I've got a bunch of questions to actually shoot at you, John.
Perfect. Running out of things to say. Go right ahead.
So we have some questions, and you can find another image, and so on. Do you shoot tethered? Capture One. Stuart was asking. I guess not on the beach, but elsewhere maybe.
Yeah, definitely not on the beach. I know there's an issue with the, I don't know if this question was setting up for the Fuji question, but if I'm shooting a commercial project that's not on the beach, or if it is on the beach, I will, and if it's a commercial project, then I'll have have a Digitech with me, and he'll have his cart. So yeah, we'll try to shoot tethered as much as we can, just because it cuts out a lot of the guesswork. And in fact, that's one of the things that led me to Capture One in the first place, was because way back a few years ago when I had first heard of it, it was because I had been doing some research on tethering, because I had my little home studio in the garage, and I was trying to look so professional and all that kind of stuff. And Capture One was the name for tethering, because everything else that was available was so unstable. So Capture One was what you used. So that's what kind of led me into this. But obviously, for something where I'm in the water and I'm in a water housing in a wetsuit and fins, I'm not tethered. And for tests where I'm just sort of walking around the neighborhood with a group or a model or something like that, I'm not really that interested in tethering, because it kind of takes you out of the moment a little bit. To have your camera attached to a cart with somebody else standing there. If it's commercial work, if it's advertising work, then yes, obviously tethering is ideal, just because everybody's getting paid, and hopefully paid a decent amount of money. You want to make sure you're getting the product or the imagery that the client is paying you for.
And to clarify, you're shooting tethered with the Canon, of course, because there is no support for Fuji cameras into Capture One.
That's correct.
And that's not because we're big bad meanies in Phazon in Denmark. There's a lot of factors that involve adding tethering support to a camera, which is kind of obviously work on our side, it's obviously work on the manufacturer's side, and it's also the whole product management decision about if we add tethering support for a camera, then what's the impact on sales and all that kind of stuff. So we're definitely not being obtuse in terms of Fuji. It's all about market demand and man hours. For example, adding Sony, I think, was about 6 months full work to add that. So it's not a walk in the park, unfortunately, because no single camera manufacturer does anything the same. So if they did, it would make life much easier, but sadly they don't. It's different protocols for Canon, Nikon, Sony, Fuji, you name it, it's all different, sadly. Just to throw, yeah, I thought I might as well answer it before someone asks. John was asking, is there any lighting on your portraits, or it's all natural?
It's all natural light. Everything that I've done is, I went through a whole stage where I was, trying to bring as many lights as I can. I had the Alien B set, and then I had the Profoto kit, and was bringing it around with me, via battery power and all that kind of stuff. And I realized it was a lot of diminishing returns. The more lighting that I tried to put in, the less I was getting back. And I know that that's not the case for everybody. It's not the case for anybody else. It was the case for me. So definitely, a few years ago, I decided that lighting, I wanted to learn to be more of a natural, shoot more natural light. And not that I find any kind of one is better than the other, or I'm a natural light photographer, or any, if there's a situation that needs lighting, by all means, I will get the lighting kit and light the heck out of it. But for the shoots, for the images that you see here, and for 99, probably I would be comfortable saying 100% of the images that you see on my website, there's no lighting no lighting used. I don't. I have a reflector somewhere. I keep losing it. I think it's right now. It's in my trunk somewhere. But I don't. I don't typically use reflectors or anything like that. I just feel like for me, it kind of. I concern myself a lot more with capturing mood, emotion, that kind of stuff. So if I'm walking around with a lighting kit, if I'm walking around with a reflector, I feel like it takes, it'll take the model out of the moment, but it also takes me out of the moment because then you have to sort of pause and consider and all this other kind of stuff. So, um, so a long-winded answer to your question is that no, there's no lighting. One of the things I've learned to do is kind of look for situations or look for scenes and settings where the natural light is available and pretty. If you take a look at this one, it's not lit. It's kind of a dark and a little bit moodier than most of my work, but it's, there's some windows, the window behind her, there's a window behind me, there was a window on the other side of her. So the room is fairly well lit to begin with. Same kind of situation here. I love doorways, and doorways to me are natural lighting studios because you have a room that's almost completely dark behind them, and you can put them right on the edge of it, and it creates such a natural, beautiful, like lighting studio, like this, for example.
Who needs lights, eh?
Yeah, so behind me, I mean, you just see me standing there, and the we were in kind of a canyon. So behind me is the top of the canyon with the sky behind us. So no real lighting other than just natural stuff. And this was the same thing. This is just us standing on the beach, me with my camera, and you can almost see me with my hands to my face. I hope that helped that answer the question.
Yep, definitely. A few people have been asking if I just try and combine it into sort of one general question about what's your approach to getting the natural looking shots? Do you mood board the shoot? And how do you create the lifestyle expression versus the fashion type expression? Because it is quite different, really, the lifestyle look compared to the fashion look.
Yeah, it's definitely a different. There's a different mood, a different tone. Obviously, there's a lot of pre-planning that goes into the fashion, but for the lifestyle, as far as mood board, it's not something that I'll specifically sit down. Well, I mean, let me back up a minute. The answer is yes. I'll mood board some shoots if it's just me walking around with shooting some swimwear stuff, then yeah, then no, then basically that kind of like I know the images that I want to get prior. I mean, if it's pretty girl on the beach in a swimsuit, it's you really don't have to mood board anything, and unless you're putting together some pictures that are location based, and we're going to shoot here, we're going to do this, we're going to try to do this. So it's always probably a good idea to do stuff like that. I do it sometimes. I don't have a rule as to, well, I'm going to do it here, but I'm not going to do it here. I'm going to do it here, but not here. I have images that I keep on my computer of things that I'd like to shoot and things I'd like to sort of emulate, people that I look up to, and photographers that whose work that I have a great respect for. So I keep those in my head and on my computer, and as I'm shooting, I'm trying to remember, oh yeah, I want to try and shoot in this direction, I want to try and do this, I want to try and do that. So I hope that answers the question a little bit. For bigger shoots, commercial shoots, anything that money's involved, anything where people are paying me or I'm paying somebody else or anything, then we're definitely mood boarding it. We're basically like overkill. Like, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to plan it. The shots are planned, the location's planned and mood board. Everything is broken down basically, step by step, because we want to make sure that at the end of the day we have exactly what our client wants and exactly what they are paying us for. So it almost sounds like it takes a lot of the fun out of it, but it's better to go into that situation completely over prepared than even slightly underprepared from my experience of always being underprepared. um, so that said, the second part of the question, or the second half of that, is the difference between the difference for me between lifestyle and fashion. I know if you ask 100 people, you're going to get 100 different answers. To me,
Mhm.
fashion is more about obviously the fashion. It's about the clothes. It's about putting somebody in a beautiful wardrobe and taking pictures of them in a beautiful location and selling the product is the clothes. And that's fantastic. And there are people who do amazing, amazing work doing that. For me, it's I try to stick more towards the lifestyle just because it's a good question. Have I? I mean, lifestyle is you're selling the lifestyle. I've been wanting to move to Southern California since I was 8 years old, since I first knew what the surfboard was and what surfing was and all this other kind of stuff. So I knew that I always wanted to be here. So I'm so much I'm in love with the lifestyle out here. So I try to take images and try to put forward a body of work that is almost a tribute to that. So my images and what I capture tend to be more about the mood, the emotion, the feeling, whether it's fun or pensiveness, or any sort of kind of stuff of living in Southern California, which I try to translate to every location that I go to. When I shoot in New York or when I shoot in Pacific Northwest or down in Miami, I try to capture the lifestyle of the area that I'm shooting in. So I hope that answers the question. I don't know if I
I think
trailed
so.
off at the end a little bit. Okay.
Yeah, it's all relevant stuff. Don't worry. Couple
Okay.
of questions based on. Well, actually, just a question that's kind of related. That are you ever given any color palette to work towards for commercial shoots, hue or tone, or anything that you need to work with?
That's actually a really good question.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to think of, yes, there's definitely a color palette. And being here in Southern California, everything is, I feel like it's almost like a finite color palette. It's very like yellows and oranges and blues and browns, and there's a lot of natural earthy golden sunset type things that we work, and that's my aesthetic. I've shot for clients who they haven't given me a color palette per se, but we have the wardrobe planned, we have the location planned, whereas everything sort of falls into a certain um, range of we're not going to be taking pictures of you know mismatched colors or anything like that. Everything kind of so yes, everything would fall into a color palette. So to answer your question, yes, I've been we do work within color palettes for sure.
Good stuff. If you're working, a question from Maria, if you're working freehand with lifestyle photography, do you feel you have more freedom and get better, surprise shots, candid shots?
Absolutely, definitely.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. And this is my experience. It could be somebody could be much more comfortable walking around with a full kit or cart behind them, and they can get amazing stuff. For me, personally, I'm happy with the work that I get being very candid, or being very, um, you know, obviously when you're doing a shoot, people, hopefully the model knows that you're shooting, and the people you're working with know you're shooting. So there you have parameters, and obviously you're not just sneaking up on somebody and taking their picture. So within the boundaries of a shoot, there's a lot of freedom. You plan everything, and then you go down to more of a micro level, and you have a lot of fun. For example, the image that's on the screen right now, we planned the location, we planned the wardrobe. I knew who I was shooting. I knew what we were going to do. But something like this, which wound up being one of my favorite images, it wasn't planned. I think prior to this, she was wearing a pair of high heels that would have looked ridiculous on the beach. So we just sort of jumped out of our car. The sun was setting. We just were like, yeah, go have fun. Um, they're a couple in real life. So hanging out with them was basically me third wheeling and just sort of capturing images of them just hanging out on the beach, walking around, having fun. I think at this point she had walked out into the water. He didn't want to take his boots off because they were lace-ups and they were a pain to get off, apparently. So this was just sort of fun. So I was standing on the, right off the edge of the water. He was standing kind of off to the side of me. She turned around, lifted up her the hem of her pants, and just sort of started laughing. The wind blew all of a sudden, and it was this great series of images that I really, really like. So you plan for a lot, and then you leave this little kind of 10% of X factor sort of stuff where it just anything can happen. And I feel like if you're going in with such a plan, if you're going in tethered to a cart, or you're walking around with this big crew of people behind you, a lot of those kind of intimate moments, a lot of those spontaneous moments kind of get watered down a little bit, at least in my experience.
Question. Say the questions are coming in thick and fast. We might look at an image shortly. Jason and John, kind of similar question. John framed it in the context of how do you brief the model, and Jason kind of expands from that and talks about, or asks, how do you get the emotion out of the subjects? Are they just naturally good at it, or do you play more of the role of a director or comedian, maybe?
Definitely comedian, absolutely comedian. I think if you want to shoot, in my experience, if you want to shoot happy images of people having fun, you have to be a happy person and you have to be having fun. I can't imagine showing up to any of these shoots in a bad mood and sticking through the bad mood for the shoot and still getting images of happy people having a good time. Because I know there have been times when I've been on the other side of the camera and the person taking the picture has been in kind of a bit of a bad mood, and it carries right over. I start to feel it, and then I start to feel self-conscious, and I'm sort of like, well, what am I, are you mad at me? What did I do? And I can't laugh and smile and have fun. So there's a lot of that to it, but I think there's a lot to be said about working with people who are good-natured, who are professional. I'm lucky in that I live in Los Angeles, and you could throw a rock and hit a professional model. Like they're all over the place. So the people that I work with tend to be on the more professional side. They know what they're doing. They know how to have fun. They know, everything's sort of relaxed. When I do work with people who are new to it, then it falls on me a lot more to be a little bit more of a over-the-top personality, kind of laughing and smiling and taking away a lot of their insecurities and making them feel, not just confident, but overly confident, and that you're having a great time and you're getting amazing images, and everybody's having a good time, everybody's having fun and all this kind of stuff. So the answer to the question is yes, straight across the board. Yes, they're professional. Yes, I take on a directing role, and yes, it's comedian. I've seen a lot of photographers. My girlfriend is a photographer, and I've watched her and learned a lot from her, where she is. I think she's got this over-the-top personality, and everything is fun, and everything is having this great time, and it's genuine, it's sweet, it's sincere, and people pick up on it instantly. And I've learned how to do that, or I'm constantly learning how to do that, because I think it translates very well to the work. At least for me, I can't shoot happy photos if I'm not in a happy mood, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely makes sense, definitely. Okay, last kind of combined question, and then we might look at an image. In terms of like Fuji versus Canon and RAW files versus Canon, so switching from the big DSLR to the mirrorless, how does that feel? And how is, in your opinion, are the Fuji files kind of dealt with in Capture One? Like maybe if you compare, how does a Canon file feel to Fuji in Capture One? Is it really the same, or does Fuji have some special quality that's hard to describe, and so
on? That's a good question. I've been using Canons for years and years, and I've used them in with Adobe Bridge and Lightroom and now Capture One, and I don't necessarily know that I feel a difference between the Fuji files and the Canon files, the RAW files. Um, I think it's more of the way they're rendered. The Canon files, I feel like out of the camera, the raw files are very, very flat. You know, it's I'm looking at this image now, and there's, I mean, granted, we had some great afternoon light, and it's a doorway, which is one of my favorite things to shoot in. Skin tone is, you know, it's already there. She's tan. If I look at a Fuji file, I feel like there's something different. I can't put my finger on it exactly, but I mean that's the difference between all cameras. I've shot with, you know, the Canons for years. I've shot with the Fujis now for the last 6 months or so. I've shot with a couple of the Phase One, the IQ 100, the one that came out last year. I'm drawing a
Yeah,
blank on the name
the
of it.
100 I think you had to go with, yes.
I think, yeah, I shot with that one, and across the board in every category, the image, you know, the image files are different from one camera system to the other. I can't say that they necessarily, or I can't quantify what those differences are. I'm not that technical where I can say, oh well, it's this, and this. But I do know that, you know, for some of the editing, I couldn't take a Canon file and a Fuji file, having taken them, if I were to, you know, have one camera around my neck, take a picture with the Fuji, put it down, take a picture of the same subject, same time, same situation with the Canon, and then edit them both together, I don't think they would edit, or I'd be able to apply the same edits to them and have them look exactly the same. I think there's a little bit more that you have to do with one than with the other. And I'm still kind of experimenting. I'm still kind of seeing, you know, what that is and how that goes. But I do like the Fujis. I like the Fuji files right out of camera. I feel like there's a lot of life to them. This is straight out of camera. I mean, if I go to image and just go to reset, this is it. This is what came out of camera for me, and it's the raw file. So to me, this is a beautiful image as it is right now. I don't think I would really do much of anything to it. Whereas the raw file for the Canon right here, there is, you know, I'd bump up some contrast. I'd, you know, adjust the white balance a little bit. There's some things that I would do to it, whereas the Fuji is a lot of times straight out of camera.
Yeah, I think that's the feedback we get, that Fuji straight out of camera seems to be just that little bit closer. And of course, you know, Capture One has part to play with that, but also the better the sensor is, you know, the less kind of wrangling we have to do with it. Maybe it's psychological, I don't know. Yeah, right. Yeah, Fuji must be better. I think maybe the advantage of the X-Trans sensor is probably less than it used to be, because sensors have improved over the past years, whereas Fuji was a bit of a pioneer in that. But certainly, I think everyone seems to rave about the Fuji out of camera quality, so there must be some truth to that.
It's got to be something, and I try not to do it. I try to downplay it because I don't want to come across as like a Fuji fanboy or going in any kind of direction.
Sponsored by Fuji. Yep.
Exactly. But at the same time, I'm kind of impressed by them. I'm very impressed by them.
Yeah.
So yeah, take that for what it's worth.
Just so that we have at least done something in Capture One. Branko was asking if you do a lot of color editing in Capture One, how would you do it as such, or are you not a big tweaker of color?
It's not that I'm not a big tweaker of color. It's just that I don't have the. So, for example, if we were to go through this image, this is. Oops. Let me go back to. Okay, so that was the quick edit that I did, and just adding a little bit of contrast, brought the level in a little bit. Just that if I go to the color. I mean, I like to keep my work sort of consistent, so there's really not any period of time where I would go and say, well, I need to do a lot of color work on this to kind of color tone it or split tone it or do any of that kind of stuff, because it doesn't fit within the body of my work. If that were the case, if I needed to, then I would probably try to bring in somebody who has a lot more expertise in this area. Um, but for things like skin toning and things like, balancing out skin tone and that sort of thing, there are people who do this much better than I do, and my understanding of it is probably not the best. But the color editor, I would go over to, click on the dropper, choose the color, and then for something like this, I would probably maybe try to drop the saturation a little bit just to make it a little bit more natural looking. I'm not even sure if that's the right term. But then as far as something like this, let's see. And I play around with this stuff, but I'm still very much learning. It's a constant, there's sometimes I'll look at my camera and I'll say, I didn't know I could do this with my camera. So everything is a constant learning experience. I think for stuff like this, I would bring maybe add a little bit of gold or a little bit of orange to it just to kind of pop the skin a little bit more. I really don't play around with midtones or highlights all that much, because I feel like I don't know enough about it, and I don't feel like it fits within the body of my work to really play around with it too much, to kind of go off in one direction or the other. If I need to balance skin tone, I'll figure out how to do that. If I need to balance out an area or pull yellow from white or something like that, I'll do that. But for the most part, I just sort of leave that off to the side. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. And also, I think one thing for those of you who are not on Capture One yet, because I know a few of you aren't, in terms of creating color profiles, like some of the profiles you saw earlier is made by our community and so on, which they've offered up for download. So like the Fuji forum, quite a few people have offered up profiles, but the default profile, which is shipped with Capture One, if you like, for Canon or Fuji or any other camera, we shoot about 700 shots per camera to build the profile. It's not just a case of slapping up a color target, taking a picture of it, and pressing a button. It sounds a bit corny, but they are handcrafted camera profiles, and once we've kind of done the initial profile, we actually shoot the camera in various different known scenarios around Copenhagen and in the studio and so on, and then see how that compares to everything else. So this was a very roundabout way to ask a question from Maria. Said, you might not be able to answer this, John, as it was maybe too long ago, but in terms of bringing the same file into Lightroom or Aperture or Capture One, do you remember sort of what the immediate difference was between the two?
I know that there's a lot of people who Aperture I completely forgot about Aperture. I have a friend who's a diehard Aperture fan. I think if they still made it, he would still be using it, just because he loved the way it worked. I used it for a few years and then switched over to Bridge. For a lot of the studio stuff that I do, I don't do it all that often, but when I do studio stuff and I'm shooting at a higher aperture and I'm shooting with a lot more detail, I think, I don't know if it's psychological, I don't know if it's maybe just hearing it, but I do know that the images are rendered slightly more, the colors are definitely more true to what they were in person with Capture One. Lightroom, I feel like I'm still having to balance them a little bit. Aperture, I used that before I really shot in studio, before I really did anything, so I don't have much of a comparison for that. But between Lightroom and Capture One, there's definitely a little bit more tweaking that I have to do in Lightroom to get the colors more true than what I do in Capture One. And out in the real world, I know there's a lot of people who say, it renders better, it has a better rendering engine, and I'm finding that to be true. For what I do, I don't know how much of a difference it makes as far as whether it renders it, sharper or this, but the colors for me in Capture One, whether I'm in studio or out of studio, whatever, they're a little bit more true to what's in real life, I guess. Hope
Yeah.
that answers the question.
A couple of people asked earlier, and also just recently, lens focal length, favorite one on the Fuji, best one for lifestyle work, if there is one.
Mhm. Well, I mean, there's for lifestyle, I like wide, but not too wide. I'm using the Fuji X Pro 2, and I have both the 20 the 23 millimeter f 1.4, which with the crop sensor is about 35 millimeters, and then I have the 35 millimeter f2, which with the crop is about 56 millimeters, I think. I'd have to, and it's like a 1.5 crop. So yeah, so the 35 and the effectively the 35 and the 50, and I find those tend to be the best for what I like to do. The reason I got the Fuji in the first place was because I wanted something that was a little bit more portable, but that also wasn't a big 1DX or a big DSLR, in somebody's face that sort of put them off a little bit. I wanted to be able to capture more snapshot type images. And the size of the Fuji definitely has helped me with that because it's a lot more, just a regular camera. And I think people sort of, especially models who are a little bit newer, they tend to relax a little bit when you have a little, the body of the X Pro 2 in their face rather than having this gigantic DSLR in their face. For focal length, I tend to like a little bit wider when I'm using that, just because I feel like it captures the scene a little bit better. And these images that we're looking at on screen were all taken with the it doesn't have it here. Oh, I have the panel turned off. But these were down the bottom here. These were with the 23 millimeter. So you can see that down there, yeah.
It's funny, I'd expect that to look much wider, but it actually looks looks pretty good.
With you mean 35 millimeter?
Yeah, I
Or
just
yeah.
sort of, when you see 23, I just expect lots of distortion and so on, but that looks very
Mhm.
natural.
It
Yeah.
looks good, yeah. Well, it's
Yeah.
23, but it comes out to 35,
Ah,
basically,
of
is what
course,
we're.
because it's a smaller sensor. Yeah,
It's a
absolutely,
smaller sensor.
absolutely.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. So if it were like a 16 millimeter that was shooting at about 20 something, then it would be probably a little bit more distortion in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Looking at, I've lost the question. Where is it? Where is it? Christian was asking, um, is all your work commissioned, or do you sell any other work? Like if you've finished any other images, it's not part of commission work. Do you sell those in any other way?
Uh, y- I'm assuming you means like stock images or something
Yeah,
like that.
stock or library or something else that I might not have thought about. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I not really. A lot of my work and my what I do is pretty straightforward. I try to shoot with commercial clients. We shoot their apparel, we shoot their brands, that sort of stuff. If I'm not doing that, then I'm putting together you know personal shoots or testing shoots, that sort of stuff, to try to lure in some more clients or to have a constant stream of content. I have some friends who shoot stock. I have some friends who shoot and then sell their images to third parties. And honestly, I've never really looked at that. Some of the landscape stuff I wouldn't be opposed to doing, or some of the water stuff. But anything with models that I shoot, everybody tends to be with an agency. So if I were to sell it to third parties, then I would have to go through the agency, and there are agency fees, and there's paperwork and all kinds of stuff. So it just wouldn't um, it wouldn't be worth anybody's time to kind of go through that, because it would cost both time and money. So stuff like this, for example, this was just, like I said, these guys were they're a real couple. They're both signed with agencies as models. I've worked with them professionally in the past for clients, but we decided we wanted to do some personal stuff and stuff for our website. So we, hopped in the car, got some outfits together, and then drove to the beach and did some shoots. And the response to this set has been pretty good, both from a work perspective, but also from this was one of the first shoots I did with the Fuji X Pro, so I've gotten a lot of good response from that as well.
Great. Um, couple of questions because we're nearly out of time. Well, we are out of time, but
Mhm.
I'm going to overrun slightly if you don't
Sure.
mind.
I'm fine with
Um,
that. Yeah.
um, Jason was asking as a commercial question, um, how do you handle pricing with the commercial clients? Is it day rate per image, usage, 25 other different things, or what's the method? It's so difficult these days, really, to have a standard answer, I guess.
It is. It's very difficult. I have some clients who who ask for my day rate, and I'll give it to them, and they'll, you know, hopefully the goal is that they'll gladly accept it and say, that's wonderful, and here's your paycheck and all that stuff. I have some clients who I negotiate with and say, well, this is what you want, this is how, and they tell me how much they can pay, and I say, well, this is what you get for how much you pay, and they say, well, we want more than that, and I say, well, you have to pay more than that.
Hmm.
Um, and then there are some clients who say, so, thankfully, some of the bigger clients who kind of say this is industry standard for what photographers are paid, and this is what we're going to pay you. And because they're such good clients and they're recurring clients, I gladly accept and smile and say, okay. But there's a lot of negotiation. With the bigger clients, there's really not that much. It's sort of very, you know, they'll call and say, okay, we want to work with you. What's your rate? And I say, okay, it's this. And I say, okay. Some of the smaller clients, there's a lot of negotiation, and I hate to use the word piecemeal, but some of these smaller clients are saying, well, we want this, but we don't need this, but we want this. And depending on how much you want to work with them, you have to sort of put together this custom rate sheet for them, and it's a little frustrating sometimes, but at the end of the day, they're getting what they want. You're hopefully getting a rate that you're comfortable with, and from there you kind of can grow a little bit. So the answer is it varies across the board with everything.
Good question, I think, maybe to finish on, if no one asks anything else, which is a really good question, I think. Which is, after you found your niche, obviously in lifestyle, can you summarize what you did business-wise to, become a success transition from what you were doing before to the full-time person you are today?
That's a great question, actually,
Yeah.
and it's something I think about a lot, because one of the things about being freelance is you're going through these, at least in my experience and the group of people that I hang out with, you're going through periods of time where you're on top of the world, and people are, the inquiries are coming in and you're working and it's great, it's this, and then there goes a month period of time, or a 2 month or a 6 month period of time where you're sort of starting to question your existence, and did I do the right thing, and do people still like me, and do they like my photos? And so I think one of the things that I've done to make that transition easier was being in a center of lifestyle work. Los Angeles, Southern California in general, is a very lifestyle area. If I wanted to shoot high fashion, I wouldn't be in Los Angeles. I would probably be in New York or Milan, or somewhere where it would make sense to be if I was shooting that. So the first thing I did was put myself in an area where there was a need for what I do. And I realized that's not everybody can just up and do that. I was lucky I was able to do that. And then, secondly, was just having a constant stream of new work and pushing out as much as you possibly can, not to the point where you're oversaturating yourself in the market, but that you're constantly improving, you're constantly learning your craft, you're constantly working with new and talented people, you're emailing, and you're trying to get yourself out there as much as you possibly can. And it's something that I still need to do, and I still have to remind myself to do. It's not, wake up one day and say, oh, that's it, I'm successful, I can kind of sit back and coast now. It's the complete opposite. It's waking up in the morning and saying,
that would be nice, wouldn't it?
it would be great. It would be so great. Unfortunately, it's not my reality. So it's every morning I wake up and I'm like, okay, how in the world can I, land a new client today? And it's great to have repeating clients, but repeating clients were somebody else's repeating clients once, and they decided to to
True.
switch. So you never know when these people are going to decide that, you know what, you run out of usefulness, we need somebody else now. So it's, you have to have in mind this drive to sort of land new clients, keep up with your old clients, push out constant fresh work, make connections, network with as many people as you possibly can. Some of my work comes in from networking with other people who, they're if they're other photographers and they call me up and they say, hey, I can't do this job, but would you be interested in doing it? And it's just having this network of people around you that know that you're wanting to work and you're hungry for it. And it's a lot of work. It's a ton of work.
Yeah. Definitely. Okay, I said that was the last question. I lied. Okay, I'm gonna ask Peters and Amit because I promised I would. So related to the last one, how does social media play into your situation for getting clients? Does it get you clients, social media, or it's
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
it's a hobby?
it's
Yeah.
social media has been huge, and it's
Mm.
as much as everybody wants to downplay its importance, and as much as if you can look past the selfies and you can look past the trends and all the other kind of stuff, everybody's on Instagram. Everybody is scrolling. I've talked to people who have gone into meetings with art directors and creative buyers and the people who are hiring, and they've gone in to show their portfolio, and during the meeting, people are scrolling Instagram. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah.
so you have to be on social media. You don't necessarily have to curate it to where it's only your work. Well, it should be only your work, but you don't have to curate it to where it becomes strictly a portfolio. But
Mm.
if you're just starting out, I don't think it's an understatement to say like it's very important. A lot of my work comes in from social media because that's how people find me. Um, Whether it's tracking back through somebody who I've worked with who have posted an image that I shot, and they're followed by somebody who's followed by somebody who tracked it back to me and was able to contact me through that, or if it's getting direct to a creative director and having them finding their email and saying, hey, you liked 18 of my photos, why don't we work together? And
Mhm.
you know what I mean? So there's a lot, and then on another note, it's especially Instagram. It's a great way to connect with people directly, whether they're fans or friends or they like your work or you like their work, or it's just a great way. It kind of cuts out a lot of that middle ground where it's you're emailing, you're going this, you're waiting for an email. It's direct and it cuts out a lot of stuff. And I found it has been a great tool for me and whatever success I've experienced in the last couple of years. In fact, a few days ago, my Facebook thing popped up. That was the first image that I ever posted on Instagram in like 2010, I think, or something like that. And I looked at it and I sort of stared at it for a minute and thought, wow, who would have thought from that point of posting one photo to where not only myself, but where Instagram would have gone from that point back in 2010. So yeah, social media is huge, and I think that's an understatement
Yep,
to even say that.
for sure. And from what I've heard from professionals that yes, they've got uh, amazing amount of work from Instagram, which I didn't appreciate personally.
Mhm. Yeah,
Directly, people contacting them through Instagram, which is
yeah,
kind of great, but surprising. And also that if they didn't have a presence on social media, that people tend to check them out. They say, oh, they hear about John Schell or whatever. Okay, let's go and look at his social media and see what kind of stuff he does. Oh yeah, he's the guy for us.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, 'cause
exactly. And oh, go ahead.
I was
Um,
going
oh,
to say
yeah,
that. In the past they would just go to your website, but probably before going to your website, uh, and I'm starting to do it myself when we, work with photographers for collaborations at Phase One. It's almost like the go-to is Instagram, which isn't necessarily the something you would have done 5 years ago or whatever, which is crazy when
right.
you think about it. Yeah.
And you know what? I think the reason for that is that it's a good indicator of personality. You know what I mean? Like you go to a website and
Yeah.
the work is there and it's great. It could be beautiful work, but you go to Instagram to see the personality. Like on my
Yes.
website, I have a paragraph about me, or two paragraphs about me. On my Instagram, some of the captions go into depth about, things I'm excited about, things and granted, you have to search for it, but they're, it's a day-to-day journal of stuff, and
Hmm.
I think an amazing tool for work, but also personally, I think it's an amazing tool.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Okay, last question, which I promised Amit
Mhm.
I would ask, which was, um, where is it? Where is it? I can't see it. Hang on, let's look for the name. Amit, Amit, Amit. Oh, how do you search for a wardrobe stylist? Something simple, but good question, I
It
think.
Yeah, it is. It depends. If it's somebody that I want to work with, or if it's a shoot that I'm working on that's for portfolio, a test, or something like that, I'll try to look on social media. I have there's a network of people that I'm friends with, whether it's other photographers or models that I've worked with, or companies that I've worked with, people that I've connected with on actual shoots. Um, I'll find them through that. If it's something that's, if I can't find anybody available for that thing, via those means, I can always go to one of the agencies here who represent wardrobe stylists. There are several in the area who some there are agencies who represent photographers, or agencies who represent models. There are also agencies who represent wardrobe stylists, um, prop stylists. The behind the scenes people like ourselves also are represented. So you can always find somebody that way. But for the most part, it's through social media and through people who I've worked with, and friends who are photographers who have worked with stylists. And this goes back to what you said, David. It's somebody gives you a name, but first thing you do is find their social media to see their work.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
it all goes right back to Instagram. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. Um, well, I think that closes nicely for today. I was just going to read out what Alice said, which was, "Thanks, John. Love your work and style. It's been a pleasure. We're looking to capture
Thank
one. Love
you.
what I saw." So, yeah, definitely, definitely. It's been really a really interesting chat. That's for sure.
Oh, good.
Um,
Yeah, I'm glad
with
everybody enjoyed it. Mhm.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
I'm glad everybody enjoyed it. I sat here about an hour and 15 minutes ago wondering how I was going to talk past the first 5 minutes because I really had nothing that I thought I was going to say.
Yeah.
And here we are, an hour and 12 minutes later.
And Amit says we love your beard too. I know. I think everyone's got
Uh,
beard envy. That's for sure. If you haven't seen John's beard, go to his Instagram account and
uh,
you'll be able to see it in all its glory. Yeah.
it's all gray. I woke up one morning and it was like this, and it's
I just stole the screen sharing off you, John, if you didn't realize
okay.
in the background. So I just wanted to mention to anyone else, next webinar, 26th of January. That's next week, I think. Culling, rating, and selection, although I was reprimanded by someone today that culling was something to do with sheep. So if you don't like the term culling, then selecting, rating, and selection. And the link to sign up for that is going to be in the follow-up email you'll get in an hour or so. So if you want to sign up for that, it would be great to see you next week. And actually on the 30th of January, I'm coming to almost your area, John, because Capture One's going to
Oh,
be on Creative Live. So there's
oh,
going to
very
be
cool. Yeah.
yeah, a 2 day creative live session with me, if you can cope with me for 2 days. So if you're in San Francisco and you want to join the audience, then let us know. Let me know on webinar@phaseone.com because you could come in and sit for free and get a free lunch. So even better.
Wow.
Even though there's no such thing as a free lunch, I think there actually is at this time. Yeah.
This time they mean it.
Yeah, this time they mean it. Exactly. Exactly. So thanks again, John. I've put in your the ways to follow John, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook in the follow-up email. So if you want to join John on Instagram, you can as well. So look out for that in an hour or so's time, and I'll get the recording up tomorrow if you want to listen to us rabbiting on again as such. Nice. Great
All
stuff.
right.
All right, John. Thanks again, and we shall see you around on the internet very shortly, I'm sure.
Okay, sounds good.
All
Thanks so
right.
much.
Take care. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.